The groom's family thought they had everything under control. Just hours before the ceremony, they cornered the bride with a secret prenup, mocking her, humiliating her, and daring her to walk away. She signed with a calm smile, saying nothing. But at the altar, when it was her turn to speak, she revealed something that made their faces drain of color. This is the story of a bride they underestimated, and the shocking twist that turned their scheme upside down. Hello family, welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please, subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten, and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together, we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. The Hayes mansion glowed with golden chandeliers, their light spilling across marble floors and walls lined with family portraits that whispered of power, money, and a legacy guarded for generations. Guests in shimmering gowns and tailored suits filled the grand hall, clinking champagne glasses, laughing too loudly, and sneaking curious glances at the young woman standing at the center of it all. Emily Carter. Her soft smile and modest grace contrasted sharply with the ostentatious glitter of the Hayes family wealth. She wore a dress that wasn't designer but looked regal nonetheless, a reflection of her natural elegance. Tonight was her engagement party, her official entry into the world of the Hayes family. And though the warmth of the celebration seemed directed at her, Emily could feel the cold currents underneath. Standing at her side was Richard Hayes, tall, polished, and the kind of man who knew how to charm a crowd. He kept an arm loosely around her waist, whispering sweet nothings into her ear for appearances, though his eyes often wandered, scanning the room as if searching for approval. Everyone watching would say Emily had caught the jackpot, a wealthy heir from a family of influence. Yet behind Emily's gentle smile was a knot of unease. It wasn't the luxury, she could adjust to that. It was his mother, Margaret Hayes. She moved through the crowd like a queen inspecting her subjects, her diamond necklace catching the light with every deliberate step. The woman's gaze could cut glass, and though she greeted Emily with polite words, her eyes never softened. "Emily," Margaret said at one point, her voice smooth but laced with superiority, "you look lovely tonight. I must say it's impressive how well you fit in." Emily forced another smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Hayes. I'm grateful for everything you've done." Margaret's lips twitched, something between a smirk and disapproval. "Yes, gratitude. It's an admirable quality. I hope it lasts." The words hung in the air like perfume that quickly turned sour. Emily tried to shake it off. She told herself it was just nerves, that Margaret would warm to her in time. Richard squeezed her hand as if to reassure her, but his grip was light, perfunctory. Later that night, Emily overheard two young women gossiping near the champagne table. "They say Richard's been seen at that rooftop bar downtown," one whispered. "Not alone either." Emily's ears burned. She froze in place, pretending to look at the flower arrangements while their words stabbed into her. "Probably just rumors," the other girl laughed. "But still, imagine." Emily swallowed hard. She knew Richard worked late, that he had social obligations. He was a man of standing. He couldn't be home every night. But still, the doubts crept in. She shook them off. "No. Richard loves me. I know he does." But the seed had been planted. As the evening drew to a close, Emily slipped out into the garden for some air. The party buzz faded behind her, replaced by the whisper of fountains and the rustle of leaves in the night breeze. She breathed deeply, trying to calm the unease in her chest. That was when she heard voices, low, urgent, coming from the terrace above. Margaret's voice, sharp and commanding. "Richard, you cannot ignore this!" She is not from our world. She doesn't understand what it takes to protect this family, this legacy. Do you want to throw everything away because of a pretty face? Emily froze. Her heart pounded as she recognized Richard's hesitant voice. Mother, please. I love her. Emily isn't. Don't be foolish, Margaret snapped. Love fades. Money, power, reputation, those are permanent. Mark my words, she's after the comfort, the security. These girls always are. She'll smile sweetly while draining you dry. Emily's eyes burned with tears. Each word was a blade, but what cut deeper was Richard's silence after Margaret's accusations. He didn't defend her. Not truly. Mother, I think she cares for me, he muttered weakly. That's not enough, Margaret hissed. If she truly loves you, she'll sign. And if she refuses, you'll know exactly what she was after all along. Emily's knees trembled. She gripped the garden wall to keep from collapsing. They were talking about her, about marriage, about testing her. Her chest ached. She wanted Richard to shout back, to declare that he trusted her, that he didn't need tests or contracts, but his silence told her everything. Emily slipped away before they noticed her. She returned to the glowing party, her face calm, her smile practiced. No one saw the storm in her heart. Claire found her near the dessert table, balancing 2 slices of cake. There you are! I thought you ran away. Emily forced a laugh. Just needed some air. Claire studied her. Best friends knew things without needing words. You're pale! Did something happen? Emily shook her head quickly. Nothing. Just tired, that's all. But Claire wasn't convinced. She handed Emily a slice of cake, lowering her voice. Don't let them get to you. You're stronger than they know. Emily wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe Richard loved her enough to fight for her, to protect her from his mother's cruelty. But deep inside, she felt the crack widening. The night ended with applause and champagne toasts. Richard kissed her cheek, smiling for the cameras, while Margaret and Thomas Hayes stood proudly behind them like puppeteers pulling invisible strings. Emily smiled too, but her thoughts whispered otherwise. This is supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. So why does it feel like a warning? The weeks following the engagement were a blur of preparations. Wedding plans, endless fittings, interviews with magazines eager to showcase the society wedding of the year. To outsiders, Emily and Richard were the perfect couple, young, beautiful, destined for a glamorous future. But beneath the surface, tension brewed. Margaret inserted herself into every decision. Flowers, guest lists, even the design of Emily's gown. We must keep the family's image consistent, she would say, her tone always sugar-coated but unyielding. Emily found herself nodding politely, even as she felt her identity being erased. Richard, meanwhile, grew distant. He was always busy, always rushing from one meeting to another. When they were together, he was affectionate, but distracted, his phone buzzing constantly. Emily tried to ignore it. She told herself this was just the stress of wedding planning. But Claire noticed. You're excusing too much, Em, Claire said one afternoon over coffee. A man who loves you doesn't make you doubt every word. You deserve someone who chooses you, fully, not halfway, not when it's convenient. Emily stirred her drink in silence, unwilling to admit how deeply those words stung. Then came the dinner at the Hayes mansion. A formal event. Just family. Emily sat at the long oak table under the watchful gaze of ancestral portraits. Margaret's every question felt like an interrogation. So, Emily, Margaret began, slicing into her steak. What does your family think of all this? It must be overwhelming for them, stepping into our world. Emily smiled politely. They're happy for me. They only want what's best. Margaret's eyebrows arched. I see. And what is best for you, Emily? Comfort, security, a lifetime of ease. Emily's fork paused mid-air. She met Margaret's eyes, searching for a hint of warmth, but found only challenge. "I want love," Emily said softly but firmly. The table fell silent. Thomas gave a low chuckle, shaking his head as if amused by her innocence. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his eyes on his plate. Margaret smiled coldly. How quaint. That night, as Emily left the mansion, she caught Richard by the arm. "Why didn't you say anything?" she whispered. "When your mother speaks to me like that." Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emily, you know how she is. She doesn't mean it. She just wants to protect the family. You don't need to take it so personally." Her chest tightened. "So I should just accept being insulted? Humiliated?" "Please, don't start," Richard muttered. "It's just how things are. Once we're married, it'll be easier." Emily pulled away, staring at him with wide eyes. Easier? He didn't understand at all. Or worse, he did, and chose not to care. That night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her mind replayed Margaret's accusations, Richard's silence, the whispers of infidelity, the weight of wealth and expectations pressing down on her. She had stepped into this engagement with hope, believing love could bridge the gap between their worlds. But now, cracks were spreading across that hope like fractures in glass. Still, Emily told herself she had no choice. Her family adored Richard. They saw him as her protector, her happily ever after. If she walked away, she would not only break her own heart, but theirs. And so she resolved to endure, to smile, to nod, to keep her pain hidden. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered a truth she wasn't ready to face. This was only the beginning. And the storm ahead would be far worse than she imagined. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell, so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from and how did this story speak to you? The morning of Emily's wedding dawned in soft sunlight, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe it was a sign, a blessing, a promise that love would carry her through the storm of doubts. Her reflection in the mirror showed a bride radiant in white silk, her veil flowing like water, her eyes lined with hope and exhaustion all at once. The house buzzed with nervous energy. Bridesmaids hurried through hallways, florists arranged bouquets, and photographers snapped candid shots. Yet amid the bustle, a shadow stretched longer than the light. At precisely 10 o'clock, a knock sounded on the door of Emily's dressing room. Claire, fixing Emily's veil, frowned at the intrusion. "Who is it?" she asked sharply. A man's voice answered, cool and unfamiliar. "Hayes, family attorney. The groom's parents would like a word with Miss Carter." Emily's stomach clenched. She exchanged a glance with Claire, who immediately bristled. "This isn't the time." But Emily raised a hand, her calm masking the unease curling inside her. "It's fine. I'll go." Claire's protest died on her lips. She knew better than to push when Emily wore that serene mask, the one that hid storms beneath. Emily followed the attorney down hushed corridors until they stopped outside a private room at the far end of the hall. The door opened to reveal Margaret Hayes, sitting regally at a mahogany table, Thomas beside her, his expression unreadable. Richard stood a step back, avoiding her eyes, hands clasped tightly as though bound. On the table lay a stack of papers. Margaret's smile was razor-thin. "Emily, darling. Come in. We have just a small formality before the ceremony." Emily's heart thudded. The air was colder here, heavy with unspoken judgment. She sat, slowly, her gown whispering against the polished floor. Margaret slid the papers toward her. "A prenuptial agreement. Nothing unusual, really. simply to ensure that, should this union dissolve, the Hayes estate remains untouched. Emily blinked, stunned. A prenup? Now? Hours before. Don't act so surprised, Margaret cut in, her tone sharp. Surely you didn't think we would hand over generations of wealth to someone of modest means without safeguards. Her words dripped with disdain. Someone of modest means. Emily's cheeks flushed. She glanced at Richard, praying he would intervene, speak, defend her. But he kept his gaze fixed on the floor, jaw tight. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. This is not personal, dear. It's simply business. If you truly love Richard, you'll sign. If not... She let the silence stretch like a knife hovering over the table. You're free to walk away. Better now than later. Thomas chuckled under his breath. Though something tells me your family would be devastated if you abandoned the Hayes name today. Imagine the shame. Emily's chest constricted. They weren't only humiliating her, they were trapping her. If she refused, she would shatter her family's pride, humiliate them in front of the entire town. If she agreed, she would erase her dignity, walking into marriage already stripped of power. Her throat tightened, but she managed to whisper, "Why now? Why not weeks ago?" Margaret's smile sharpened. Because, my dear, timing is everything. A woman shows her true colors when pressed. Consider this. Your final test. The lawyer slid a pen across the table. Just sign here. Emily's hand trembled as she picked up the pen. Her mind screamed, don't do this. Walk away, prove them wrong. But her heart was heavier than her will. She thought of her mother, her siblings, the pride shining in their eyes when they spoke of the wedding. How could she be the reason their joy turned to scandal? She looked once more at Richard. His silence pierced deeper than his parents' cruelty. His eyes flickered briefly to hers, then dropped. He wouldn't fight for her. He wouldn't risk their wrath. Emily swallowed her pain, pressing it down into a quiet place inside her where no one could see. With a steady hand, she signed her name. The scratch of the pen across paper sounded louder than the ringing of church bells. Margaret's eyes glinted with triumph. There now. That wasn't so difficult, was it? Thomas smirked. I told you she'd do it. Girls like her never walk away when they've reached this far. They laughed softly between themselves, their amusement as cruel as the ink that now bound Emily. Richard finally looked up, his lips parting as though to speak, but no words came. His silence was worse than mockery. It was betrayal wrapped in cowardice. Emily rose to her feet, folding her hands gracefully in front of her. Her face betrayed no anger, no despair, only calm. Thank you, she said softly, for showing me what family means to you. Margaret tilted her head, frowning slightly at the calmness in her voice, but Emily did not falter. She smoothed her dress, turned toward the door, and walked away. As she stepped into the hallway, her composure finally cracked. She pressed her hand against the wall, her chest heaving silently. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes but never fell. She would not let them see her break. Not now, not ever. Claire was waiting near the dressing room, her face etched with worry. What happened? You've been gone forever. Emily shook her head, forcing a smile. Nothing. Just details. Claire studied her closely, recognizing the lie but choosing not to press. Instead, she squeezed Emily's hand. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. No wedding is worth your soul. Emily's smile faltered. I know. But today isn't about me alone. Too many people are watching. She turned toward the mirror, adjusting her veil again. Her reflection showed not a broken woman, but a bride cloaked in resilience. Her eyes shimmered with a fire that Margaret Hayes had failed to extinguish. Leaning closer, Emily whispered, so only she could hear, This wedding will be unforgettable. The hours crawled by until the ceremony. Guests filled the grand cathedral, the sound of music swelling as families gathered, waiting for the spectacle of wealth and love. Richard stood at the altar, his suit flawless, his smile strained. Margaret and Thomas sat proudly in the front row, convinced they had secured their legacy. Emily, behind closed doors, took one last deep breath. She touched the spot on her gown where her heart beat hardest. Pain still echoed in her chest, but beneath it, something new stirred. Something sharp, unyielding, dangerous. Humiliation had burned her once. But at the altar, she promised herself, the fire would burn in another direction. And when the doors opened and the world turned its eyes to her, Emily Carter walked forward not just as a bride, but as a woman who had already begun writing the next chapter of her own story. The cathedral bells tolled in deep, solemn echoes, their sound rolling through the city like an ancient announcement of fate. Guests filled every pew, the air humming with whispers and perfume. White roses lined the aisles, their petals glistening beneath the soft light of stained glass windows. To an outsider, it was a flawless wedding, grand, elegant, the kind of spectacle reserved for families of legacy. But for Emily, hidden behind the heavy doors at the back of the church, the beauty felt like a cage. Her veil framed her face like a curtain, hiding the quiet storm beneath her calm expression. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, her steps steady, her posture regal. To the crowd waiting for her entrance, she would look every bit the radiant bride. Yet only Claire, standing close by, saw the truth flickering in her eyes. Calm, yes, but not soft. Cold, measured. "Are you ready?" Claire whispered, adjusting the lace. Emily met her friend's gaze. "I've never been more ready." The doors opened, music swelled, and the congregation rose as Emily walked forward, each step deliberate, each movement graceful. Cameras flashed. Gasps of admiration followed her down the aisle. At the altar, Richard Hayes stood in his immaculate black suit, his smile polished for the crowd. Behind him, Margaret and Thomas sat in the front pew, smug pride etched into their faces. They believed they had already won, that Emily, having signed their cruel contract, had been put in her place. But Emily's face revealed nothing. She carried her bouquet like a queen carries a scepter, her steps echoing a silent promise. "You will not see me break." The ceremony began with prayers and blessings, voices rising and falling in practiced rhythm. The priest spoke of love, unity, and devotion, words that rang hollow in Emily's ears. Her gaze flickered once toward Richard, who met her eyes briefly before looking away. His skin shone faintly with sweat, though the cathedral was cool. When it came time for vows, the cracks began to widen. Richard cleared his throat, his voice unsteady as he repeated the priest's words. "I, Richard Hayes, take you, Emily Carter." His voice wavered. He swallowed hard, pausing too long between lines, sweat beading at his temple. Guests shifted in their seats, murmurs rising, wondering why the confident groom seemed so unsure. Margaret's eyes narrowed from her pew. Thomas frowned, his jaw tightening. Emily stood silently, watching him. She saw more than nerves. She saw guilt. Just then, Claire's phone buzzed in her hand. Startled, she glanced down, instinctively shielding the screen from curious eyes. A new message. Her breath caught as she tapped it open. Her blood ran cold. The images staring back at her were damning, grainy but clear enough. Richard, in a hotel suite, lips locked with another woman, his arms tangled around her. The timestamp read 3 weeks ago. Just 3 weeks. Claire's hands shook. She had suspected something for months. Whispers in society circles, vague rumors she had tried to chase down for Emily's sake. But now the proof was undeniable, cruel in its timing. Her heart hammered as she debated. Should she show Emily now? Or wait? Her eyes flicked up, meeting Emily's. Emily tilted her head the slightest fraction, as if sensing the weight of Claire's gaze. Claire, with trembling resolve, angled the phone discreetly toward her. Emily's eyes dropped briefly to the screen, her expression unchanging. Not a blink, not a flinch. She lifted her eyes again, calm as ever, veil falling back into place like armor. Claire's throat tightened. Any other woman would have crumbled, gasped, fled the altar in tears. But Emily simply inhaled once, slow and steady. Inside, however, her heart cracked wide open. It wasn't only Richard's cowardice in that private room with the prenup. It wasn't only his silence when his mother humiliated her. It was this, the final knife. The man she was about to bind her life to had betrayed her not just with weakness, but with infidelity. The perfect groom, the polished fiancé, the man of honor, exposed in a single photo as nothing more than a liar. Her suffering deepened, but no one in the pews could see it. To them, she was still the serene bride, poised beneath her veil, waiting to speak her vows. The priest turned to her at last. "Emily Carter," he said gently, his voice filling the hushed cathedral. "Do you take Richard Hayes to be your husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" The congregation leaned forward, expectant. Margaret folded her hands smugly, confident in the answer. Richard straightened, relief flickering across his face, desperate for her to speak the words that would seal their image of perfection. But Emily did not speak right away. She smiled, sweetly, almost tenderly. The pause stretched long enough for whispers to ripple through the pews. Margaret's brow furrowed, Richard's throat bobbed nervously. And then Emily's voice rang clear, carrying across the cathedral. "Before I promise anything," she turned her head, her veil catching the light, her calm smile still fixed in place. "I have a few words to share with everyone here." Gasps fluttered through the crowd. The priest faltered, glancing uncertainly at Richard. Margaret stiffened in her seat, her face tightening into a mask of suspicion. Thomas leaned forward, his knuckles white against the pew, Richard's face drained of color. "Emily," he whispered, a warning laced with panic. But Emily stood tall, her bouquet steady in her hands, her voice steady as stone. She was no longer the timid bride they had cornered with contracts and silence. She was something else now. Calm, deliberate, unstoppable. The cathedral fell into silence. Every eye was on her, every ear strained for her next words, and Emily Carter, radiant and betrayed, prepared to unravel the illusion of the Hayes family in front of them all. The cathedral was silent, so silent that the sound of Emily's breath beneath her veil could be heard by the front row. Her smile never wavered, her eyes shimmering with a calm so unnerving that Richard shifted uneasily at her side. "Before I promise anything," she repeated, her voice steady, clear, and deliberate. "I have a few words to share with everyone here." Murmurs rippled through the congregation. Guests exchanged confused glances. Margaret's posture stiffened, her fingers curling around the edge of the pew. Thomas narrowed his eyes, already sensing trouble. The priest opened his mouth to object, but Emily raised a hand with quiet authority. The simple gesture silenced him, and the entire cathedral. All eyes turned to her. She inhaled once, letting the moment stretch, letting anticipation coil tight in the room. Then she turned, not to Richard, but to the hundreds of guests gathered before her. "Marriage," Emily began, her voice ringing with quiet strength, "is supposed to be a union built on trust, love, and respect. But what do you do when those things are stripped away? When the very foundation is nothing but lies?" A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. Richard's smile faltered. Emily continued, her voice sharp but never trembling. Just hours before I walked down this aisle, I was called into a private room. There, I was humiliated by the very family I was meant to join. Richard's parents, Margaret and Thomas Hayes, presented me with a secret prenuptial agreement. Gasps shot through the cathedral. Heads whipped toward Margaret, whose face paled, though she tried to maintain composure. "They told me," Emily pressed on, her voice cutting through the whispers, "that I would never touch a single cent of their wealth. They mocked my background, sneered at my family, and dared me to walk away." A woman in the second row raised a hand to her mouth in shock. Someone else muttered, "Unbelievable." Emily's eyes swept over the guests, unflinching. "I signed it. Not because I accepted their insult, but because I refused to let their arrogance define me. I came here for love, not for money." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Margaret, her face flushed with fury, hissed under her breath, "Enough!" But Emily was not finished. Her gaze shifted, slow and deliberate, to Richard. But the prenup wasn't the only betrayal. Richard stiffened, panic flickering in his eyes. Emily's voice hardened. "While I prepared for this wedding, while I trusted in our future, Richard was busy. Just 3 weeks ago, he was photographed in a hotel room with another woman." A collective gasp echoed through the cathedral, louder than before. Emily raised her hand, and Claire, ever ready, stepped forward with her phone. She lifted it high, displaying the damning photos on the glowing screen. Murmurs exploded into shocked exclamations. Richard lunged toward Emily, his voice breaking. "Emily, stop! It wasn't like that!" But she stepped back, her eyes cold. "Not like that?" "Then explain the dates, the pictures, the evidence. Explain the cowardice of smiling at me in public while betraying me in private." Richard's face drained of color. He stammered, searching for words, but none came. Gasps turned into murmurs of disgust. Guests whispered furiously, some shaking their heads, others glaring at the groom. Margaret clutched her pearls, her mask of pride cracking as her son's sins were laid bare. But Emily wasn't finished. Her tone softened, calm, almost gentle, yet filled with iron. "You see, the Hayes family thought they were clever. They thought they had all the power. They mocked me, believing I was marrying into wealth because I had none of my own. They thought I was beneath them." Margaret's eyes widened, a flicker of dread breaking through her anger. Thomas shifted uncomfortably, his knuckles tightening against the pew. Emily's next words cut through the air like a blade. "What they never bothered to ask, what they never cared to know, is that I am not poor. My late father, whom many of you knew as a quiet and humble man, left me controlling shares in a rising tech company. That company, in just the past year, has outpaced the Hayes family's holdings. I stand here today, not as a beggar at your table, but as a woman who could buy and sell everything you hold dear." The cathedral erupted. Gasps, shocked cries, the scraping of chairs as people turned to one another in disbelief. Margaret's face blanched, her composure shattering. Thomas's lips parted, but no sound emerged. And Richard's knees buckled as if the ground beneath him had been ripped away. Emily lifted her chin, her voice carrying over the chaos. "I never flaunted it because wealth doesn't define me. I wanted love. I wanted a partner. But clearly love was never what this family offered me." Richard stumbled forward, his voice desperate. "Emily, please, I didn't mean... This changes nothing. We can still... Stop!" The single word cracked through the air, silencing him. Emily's hand trembled slightly as she held her bouquet, but her voice never wavered. "You cheated on me. You betrayed my trust. You let your parents humiliate me, and you stood silent when I needed you most. And now you dare to beg for forgiveness, not out of love, but out of fear of losing everything." Richard's eyes filled with panic. "Please, I love you." "No," Emily said, shaking her head. You love control. You love appearances, but you never loved me. She turned back to the guests, her eyes steady. I came here to marry for love. But clearly love was never what this family offered me. Then, slowly, deliberately, she removed the engagement ring from her finger. Her hand hovered for just a moment before she let it fall, the sound of the ring hitting the marble floor echoing through the cathedral like a final judgment. She lowered her bouquet and dropped it at Richard's feet. Consider this ceremony over. For a long, stunned moment, no one moved. Then the whispers began to swell. Shock, outrage, admiration. Guests craned their necks to watch as Emily turned, her veil trailing behind her, and walked down the aisle with her head held high. Richard reached out, but she didn't look back. Margaret collapsed into her seat, pale and trembling. Thomas pressed his hands to his face, rage and humiliation etched deep into his features, and as Emily pushed open the cathedral doors, the world outside greeted her not with silence, but with chaos. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. Reporters, dozens of them, were waiting. Claire's doing. She had tipped them off hours earlier, knowing Emily's story deserved to be told. Miss Carter, is it true? Did the Hayes family force you into a prenup? Do you have proof of Richard's affair? Is it true you're wealthier than the Hayes family? The questions rained down like a storm. Emily paused on the steps, the wind tugging at her veil, and for the first time in weeks, she felt free. She smiled faintly, her voice calm but clear as she answered, not to the reporters alone, but to everyone who would hear her story. When greed and arrogance blind you, you end up destroying yourself. True worth isn't measured by money or family name. It's measured by integrity, by love, by honesty. And those who forget that lose everything.